As president, you invested a tremendous amount in reaching out to the Irish diaspora. Why did no previous Irish president invest as much as you did? And what were some of the initiatives you launched to increase the Irish diaspora's affinity to Ireland? Since most critics and others that look back now, they say it was a major success, the initiatives you took.
Well, I had been aware of the work being done by really good centres dealing with Irish emigrants, including in this country. And as a young lawyer, I had visited in Philadelphia, New York, Irish centres, and heard about the pressures and heard about the problems of the undocumented young Irish, etc. And in Britain at the time, because of the IRA campaign, the Irish were under particular siege. And the Irish centres were underfunded and not really very much supported. So I spoke about this during the campaign. And when I was elected, I said something that took on a life of its own. I said I would put a light in the window of Áras an Uachtaráin, the official residence of the president, Áras being house, the Uachtaráin being the president, the house of the president. And I didn't understand fully how powerful that symbol would be. In fact, I meant a candle initially, as I was saying earlier, and we were told by the security, no candle, it might burn the place down. So we got a lamp made specially with no switch off. And luckily, we decided, unlike President Hillary, who had been a distinguished Irish president serving for 2 terms beforehand, he had lived with his family in the side of the main building, in a sort of apartment at the side. But we decided we'd live above the very splendid rooms below, in quite nice rooms, looking out on the front and back of, the front looking out on Phoenix Park and the back looking out also on a nice green fields. And the light was in the kitchen of our private quarters. And it was very, very symbolic that the light was in the kitchen and you could see it from the road going through the park. And it literally took on an extraordinary life. It made a huge connection with Irish people. And I began to realize that when I was coming to this country as president, going to Chicago, going to San Francisco, coming here to New York, it didn't matter. People didn't, I never got a chance to mention the light because it was always mentioned. We know you have a light in the window. And for that reason, I made a speech as president to the 2 houses of the Oireachtas of the Parliament, which the president can do on occasion. And one of them was about cherishing the Irish diaspora. And I remember that the speech actually did not go down well in the Parliament. Why is an interesting question. I think I was a bit nervous giving it, and I was a bit preachy and didn't have any jokes. So that's not a good idea. Now I know, never make a speech without jokes. But for whatever reason, there was a real kind of resistance in the audience as I was addressing it. And as I came out of the chamber, I said to my close advisor, I said, well, that really went down like a lead balloon. And she said, but do you know the messages that are coming in? And they came in their thousands from the diaspora. It was quite extraordinary. And Ted Kennedy put it on the record of Congress. And then very quickly, the Irish people got used to the language of an Irish diaspora, and it changed. But it was a real case where, I don't know whether it was because I was somehow encroaching on the province of Dáil deputies or what, but I really, having addressed a lot of live audiences, when the audience really isn't with you, and they really were not with me. And yet, the outside audience was hugely there. And, it did open up, and now the successive governments have built a very, very strong relationship. And of course, once Ireland got a bit stupid with our Celtic Tiger and fell on our nose, now we're looking to this diaspora to help us. The Taoiseach is here at the moment talking about innovation, which Ireland badly needs and which we look to the diaspora here and in other parts of the world. So it's kind of come full circle. We reached out, it was well received, it helped, I think, the whole issue in Northern Ireland to show that Irishness was a broad concept that could embrace different cultures and traditions. And now we're very appreciative of the fact that the Irish diaspora cares about how Ireland comes through difficult times.
Meeting with Gerry Adams was considered by some controversial. Could you explain why? Also, what do you think of Gerry Adams, Sinn Féin, and also the provisional IRA?
I had been focusing a lot on trying to support local communities in Northern Ireland across the divide, and because of the stand that I'd taken on the Anglo-Irish Agreement, I had quite a sort of reasonable links with Protestant unionist communities, and in fact the fact that I was married to a Protestant, it signalled a little bit in that very fraught situation that, you know, where there was very little communication. But even more so, I was trying to communicate and inviting groups down from Catholic West Belfast, Republican West Belfast, because they were so isolated. They were isolated within Northern Ireland, and they were isolated from the south. And I remember groups of women coming down. Sometimes they came as joint groups, Protestant and Catholic, but a couple of times they just came from West Belfast on their own. And I still remember how much they dressed up. I mean, you know, the lipstick and the hair done, and the excitement of coming into the official residence of the president from a very isolated and economically deprived but vibrant community in West Belfast. And they told me about the youth groups and the community groups and the environmental groups, and eventually the pressure came on. There were 6 different groups who wanted me very much to come and visit West Belfast as president. Now, I'd been to other parts of Northern Ireland, and I'd been to Belfast, but never into Republican West Belfast. And I decided that this was important. I knew that if I went, I would meet all the politicians, including Gerry Adams. I was discouraged by the Irish government, but they didn't say, no, you can't. They just discouraged. I was definitely discouraged by the British government. But as far as I was concerned, if we were going to have a real peace process and a real opening up of society, then we had to build these kinds of friendships. And the day that I went on that visit, I will never forget. There was such an incredible buzz, we would say in Ireland, such an incredible sense that something had changed just from that simple visit. And already in the Irish newspapers and in the British newspapers, I was being criticised. And so much so that the Belfast organisers said, when you meet the politicians, it will not be in public. It was they who said it, not me, because they felt that it would be so controversial. So I did meet, I met the SDLP, and I met Gerry Adams. And we had a brief conversation. He welcomed me as an elected representative from the area, and it wasn't the main source. I wasn't involved in a political solution at that stage. I was very much involved in valuing a community that had been totally undervalued. We had wonderful music. The young people were so excited. And then the following morning, I was continuing my visit in Northern Ireland, and I was going to Dungannon. And I did what I normally did, got up early, washed my hair, and waited for the hairdresser who had been booked to come so that I'd look as the president's supposed to look. More difficult for women. And nothing happened. She didn't come. So I had to do my own hair, which was a bit hard because, in fact, you wait and then it's almost too late. So at the last minute, I kind of tried to. And when I arrived in Dungannon, I got criticism that I, didn't look too well that day for the cameras. And meanwhile, I was getting a lot of criticism about the previous day in West Belfast. There was a lot of coverage of it on television and newspapers, and a lot of criticism. President has got out of the role of a non-executive president, shouldn't have happened, etc. And I was giving a press conference at the airport before flying back to Dublin. And when I got to the airport, a little bit earlier than the press conference, the RUC, which at that time was the Protestant Unionist RUC, now it's the policing is shared, but at that time Protestant Unionist RUC had lined up a hairdresser before the press conference, which was really very interesting. It was kind of weird. They'd gone, I hadn't asked for anything, they'd gone to the top and they said, "We are very ashamed that this morning you didn't have the hairdresser."